The 2016 GOP nominee unveiled his strategy to defeat ISIS and radical Islam, and he actually said the words. Here are some of the highlights.
A new immigration policy is needed immediately. We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. One of my first acts as president will be to establish a commission on radical Islam, which will include reformist voices in the Muslim community who will hopefully work with us. We want to build bridges and erase divisions. The goal of the commission will be to identify and explain to the American public the core convictions and beliefs of radical Islam, to identify the warning signs of radicalization, and to expose the networks in our society that support radicalization. We will also keep open Guantanamo Bay and place a renewed emphasis on human intelligence.
And a quick programming note, tomorrow night, Donald Trump will join us right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a town hall on that very topic. But first, joining us now with reaction is former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, before we get to Donald Trump's speech, which I think really puts out their profound differences between how he would deal with ISIS and radical Islam versus Hillary and Obama, I've got to ask you about this situation in Milwaukee. We just played the tape. You have people saying burn down the white suburbs, and somebody else asking, are they white? Yeah, they're white. Yeah, they're white. Okay, get their ass. Hey, they're beating every white person. He's white. Beat his head. B word. And it goes on, and you've seen the violence, and you've seen the video. What is your reaction to this?
Well, first, this is the tragic culmination of 8 years of total failure by President Barack Obama, who has routinely attacked the police, rendered judgment when he didn't know anything about what was going on, and has increased the sense of racial hostility. Gallup reports that we now have the greatest tension that we've had in 16 years between the races. This is a tragedy to have an African-American president fail this totally. Second, remember that there were 9 people shot and 5 killed in Milwaukee in the 48 hours before this happened. But because they were just shot and killed without a policeman involved, for some reason Black Lives Matter didn't think Black Lives mattered as long as no policeman is involved. And remember, you have an African-American policeman dealing with somebody who'd already been arrested 13 different times. The gun that the person was carrying turned out to have been stolen in a burglary. And the video shows clearly that that man was aiming the gun at the policeman. Now, in a period when folks have declared war on cops, I don't think you can expect cops to wait to get shot. So my specific advice is, let's start setting up cameras so that every time you have a riot like this, we film every person involved, and in the next 3 or 4 days, we go out and pick them up. And so they get 60, 90, 120 days.
We had video of Ferguson. We had video of Baltimore.
Right.
We had those people on video. They never followed up. They never arrested those people.
That's
so
because
to me,
if you're
it's like a get-out-of-jail-free card. You're free to go and continue that behavior.
That's because the lesson of liberalism is don't lock anybody else up, even if you have 3,500 dead in Chicago. 99 people shot in Chicago last week. 24 died. But under liberalism, you yell about guns and do nothing about criminals, and everything gets worse. We've had a 20% increase in violent crime in the major cities in the last year because the Obama policies are all coming home to roost, and they're all anti-police and pro-criminal. And it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I have actually taken time on this television show, Mr. Speaker, and we have scrolled the names of those 3,500 people. Most of America never heard their names before. But if it's a high-profile racial case, if it's Cambridge, the president rushes to judgment, no due process, no presumption of innocence. The same thing in Ferguson, the same thing in Baltimore, the same thing with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. I would think in his own home city he'd care that 3,500 of his fellow Chicago citizens are dead since the time he's been president, but apparently not.
And remember, it's Hillary Clinton's birthplace. So you have the current president and their candidate for president, both from Chicago, and they seem to be totally coldly indifferent to the deaths of their fellow Americans. I mean, it's truly a tragic thing. And by the way, Sheriff Clark has been magnificent in the last 2 or 3 days. I'm so glad you're having him on tonight, because he is such, in my mind, he is a genuine American hero who's had the courage to tell the truth and to do his job.
And he's a great
and
leader.
To stand up to special interests.
All right, let me go to Donald Trump's speech for a minute. I actually think that today's speech was probably the best speech he has given since he has been a candidate, and I want to tell you why. He identified, first of all, he wasn't talking about the New York Times, wasn't talking about the mayor of Baltimore or any other people. His focus was on 2 people, which I think should be the focus in this campaign: Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. He laid out a list of one terror example after another, one bad policy failure after another, one broken part of the world after another because of what they have done. And then he laid out a solution-based program on how he would do things differently, from immigration to vetting refugees to security to identifying radical Islam, and on and on. To me, that seems to be the paradigm that he ought to take for the rest of the campaign on every issue. Forget everybody else, identify the problem and the mistakes, and offer solutions.
Well, I agree with you about that for the campaign, but I don't want to just jump past this speech. For the first time in the 37 years since the Iranians illegally seized American hostages, in the 15 years since al-Qaeda killed Americans on 9/11, for the very first time, you've had a president of the United States get up and tell the truth, that there is a system of radical Islamism.
A candidate, yeah.
You know, and he did just a remarkable job, in my judgment, of identifying the enemy, describing accurately how big the problem is. And this, in some ways, is the most important foreign policy speech since Ronald Reagan, in that it really does set the stage for a debate for the American people about what's threatening us, what should we do about it. And I think the contrast between what he did, what Donald Trump did, and where Hillary Clinton is, couldn't be clearer. This is a Grand Canyon-wide chasm of 2 totally different worldviews.
You know, you think about it, I mean, this is the JV team, as Barack Obama said. Hillary started the negotiations with the Iranians and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. They got $150 billion, then they got $400 million for hostages as a ransom payment. We don't have a strategy yet, the president once said. He said they're contained. He said ISIS does not pose an existential threat to us, which is wrong, too. We don't have that strategy quite yet. And he goes on and on. He's been wrong every step of the way, Mr. Speaker, on every...
I mean, you're right. He's been wrong and Hillary's been wrong. But I want to go back to Donald Trump just for a second. All of his critics have said, give us a clear roadmap of where you would go. Now he took what may be the most important national security threat of the next decade. He outlined what the threat is. He outlined why we have failed. He outlined how important it is. And he began to lay the base for a very serious, very dramatic change. This was truly a historic speech. And it'll be interesting to see if the mainstream media can actually focus on the speech and can actually talk about the difference between the confusion of the Obama-Clinton model and the clarity of the Trump model.
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath for that, because the biggest contributors to Hillary Clinton's campaign clearly are the media. And I would even argue that some of the Republicans that lost, that are crybabies, that have picked up their toys, that would prefer Hillary pick the Supreme Court justices. But I want to ask you one question, a strategic question in terms of the campaign. If Donald Trump approached every issue that we are facing today in terms of the economy, he gave a speech on the economy recently, if he approached immigration this way, if he approached Obamacare this way, if he approached the need for energy independence, if he approached all of these big important issues that we're now facing, Supreme Court justices, and he were to follow the same model of today, lay out the problem, the mistakes that have been made, offer a new direction, and keep his focus, wouldn't that be a winning formula?
Well, I saw one study that said if he did that, the political scientist who said the odds are that he would win by 65 or 66% because of the underlying patterns that we're faced with, which would just shock the whole system. But let's take where you are tonight. And I'm really delighted that you're in Milwaukee because it's very important. I hope, and I know he's going to be with you tomorrow night, I hope he's going to talk a little bit tomorrow night about the inner city, but I hope in the next few days you're going to see him be honest, as Sheriff Clark is. Failure in schools with the teacher union as a major enemy of children. Failure in city bureaucracies, which kill jobs with regulation. Failure among local politicians who pander to the criminals and fail to stand up for the law enforcement agencies. Failures to create a job-friendly environment. Failures to find new strategies in welfare to encourage families to stay together rather than being broken up. Sheriff Clark understands all this even better than I do. I hope that Trump is going to have the courage, and Mike Pence with him, to get right in the middle of the left zone. Take them head on. Understand the left-wing politicians will all go crazy. But they're the people who failed.
Tomorrow.
They're absolutely the people who have failed.
And you know, I'll give these statistics with Sheriff Clark in a minute, but they have failed. And most of the cities that are struggling so badly right now have been run by Democrats for decades. And under Obama, there's a 58% increase in African Americans that are now on food stamps, a 20% increase in black Americans that are not participating in the labor force. I'll get into that with Sheriff Clark. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.